In this video, we'll discuss routing tables. The routing table on a router contains a set of rules that specify where data needs to be delivered or how the router is to handle information or a packet that it receives from the network itself. This routing table is made up of multiple columns of information, with each row identifying a specific destination network. So when the router receives a packet, it looks at that layer 3 destination address of the packet and then compares it to the routing table to determine what it needs to do with that packet. So the routing table lists the routes to different network destinations that it's aware of. And the routing table will contain things like metric values, and these metric values are preference values to help choose the best route for a destination. The routing table is made up or constructed of static entries. Static entries are routing table entries that are coded by the network administrator and manually inputted into the routing table. And also the routing table is made up of dynamic entries. Dynamic entries are routing table entries that are learned from other routers through a dynamic routing protocol like RIP or OSPF. It's important to note that the dynamic entries may change as the infrastructure changes. So the dynamic routing protocols will communicate any changes to the dynamic routes over time, whereas static entries, because those were manually programmed into the router by the network administrator, those static entries will never change unless the administrator goes and reprograms them. It's also important to note that the static entry would be selected over dynamic entry. So if the administrator coded a route to a destination network that a dynamic routing protocol would also communicate, then the static entry would be selected. The contents of the routing table, as you saw in the previous slide, there's many columns to the routing table itself. And the first column is the network ID of the destination network. Then you'll have things like a cost value or a metric value as well that'll be stored with each route. And this is kind of a preference value. So depending on the maybe the routing protocol that's responsible for that route existing, the metric might be like a hop count, for instance, whereas maybe with other routing protocols like link state, it might be a cost value, right? So a preference value. We also have a next hop column, which specifies what the router is to do with packets that are destined for that destination network ID. So where do we send the packet? So what's the address of the next router? Or it could be the gateway setting as well. Other examples of columns of information that would exist in the routing table, we have the interface. So this is the interface that the router needs to send the data out in order to reach that next hop or that gateway. You also may have columns such as quality of service, or maybe even access list and filtering criteria that helps filter traffic out and controls what kind of traffic is allowed through the system. So in this video, we discuss characteristics of the routing table.